that.
Okay.
So I'm Christine Noby.
Okay, let me get the other way.
Race Frontier.
You're the
That's
president.
how it works. Yes, that is true. I always try to gloss over that
Right
in
way.
case somebody
Thank you.
else wants to volunteer for that job.
Okay.
And we are here to talk about the moon. So the title of the talk is #MoonVillage. And we're going to do several things here. We're going to do a quick review of the Apollo missions, like very quickly. We're going to very quickly take a look at Destination Moon, the special exhibit at the Science Center. We're going to talk about the mandate to return to the moon. We're going to do commercial space, about NASA's Gateway, and the European Space Agency's Moon Village concept. So we got a whole bunch. Philip is going to jump in and help. And in particular, when we talk about moon rocks, Colleen is going to jump in and help. Anybody else going to jump in and help?
I might.
Okay.
All right. So,
Okay.
big announcement.
Yay.
We are going back to the moon.
Huzzah.
Okay?
Okay.
Yay. So if you, well, we're going to talk about that, Glenn. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
So in my lifetime, I've been fascinated by the moon since I was 10 years old and watched the moon landing, and really did assume that we would be living and working on the moon by now based on all the early work. And then you know how it's been the last 20 years or so. Mars, moon, low Earth orbit, live under a rock.
Yeah.
Mars, moon,
Yeah.
flat Earth. So we've been all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
So we are going back to the moon. How do we know this? Well, the first hint came on October 5th, 2017, with the Vice President Pence's speech at the National Space Council, which was newly resurrected, and he said we will return NASA astronauts to the moon. Okay, and not only to leave behind footprints, but to build the foundation we need to send Americans to Mars and beyond. So that was the beginning. On December 11th, actually a directive was signed in the White House to return to the moon, followed by missions to Mars and beyond. And I didn't put the whole entire speech in this presentation, but it's actually a pretty good one. I don't know if you all might have missed that one. April 30th, then Wilbur Ross, who's the Commerce Secretary, he in a presentation talked about how the moon might be a gas station. Oh, you're on your way to Mars, you need to fill up with Diet Coke and gasoline. Might be a little bit different,
Yeah.
but that's the
They're in
idea.
three,
So when we're going to
Yeah.
a more distant place, like Mars or somewhere further away, most of the energy that we're spending lifting fuel to
Yeah.
go onto that trip. So if we can just use enough fuel to go to the moon and then fill up there, that saves us a huge expense.
Yeah.
Only if you make the fuel on the moon.
Yes.
Don't you
And there,
know?
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
and there's
that-
plenty of
and-
things
and
to
the-
make it from.
And the idea
yeah.
there is,
Yeah.
I'm probably getting ahead of ourselves.
You are getting ahead of
All right, I'm
that.
in
Yeah.
trouble. Come back to that.
Yeah.
We'll come
Yeah.
back to that.
If we don't answer that,
Yeah.
you break us.
And
Yeah.
then
Okay.
June 7th, the new NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine, in a presentation, actually this was with a group of journalists. He talked about how, yes, we're going to the moon, and we're starting to get dates now. So we want to get robots and landers on the
So I
surface of
can
the
use this
moon
chair.
in 2019, definitely by 2020. Okay, so I just shared that just to make sure that everybody is aware we're going to the moon. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can start thinking now, when we'll talk more about this later in the talk. Need rovers, we're going to need prospectors for ice, need to excavate the regolith to have oxygen, have fuel, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we'll come back to
And we're
this.
looking,
Regolith is broken up rock,
Yeah.
so not quite soils, it's soil without organics.
we're looking to all of you to help.
Can't call it earth.
Rock.
Yeah.
They'll use rock sometimes, so
Yeah.
it's soil, but it's not really soil.
Yeah.
Right, so if you think about on Earth, soil is a combination of dead plant material, dead animals,
Clay.
rock,
Yeah.
clay,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
And
And on the moon, all we have is pulverized rock.
Yeah.
And
Mars
so,
too.
Mars, yeah.
oftentimes people will say we need
Organics.
soil, but since there's no organics, I mean, really it's regolith. But So if I say soil, I'm
Fancy
referring
word.
to the regolith. Some people talk about moon dust as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a step back, okay, and remember that this, well, it didn't really begin with Apollo 11, but that Apollo 11 was the first mission that landed humans on the moon, okay? And the goal was literally to put humans on the moon and return them safely to Earth. And it really wasn't for science, it was a political stunt to show the Soviet Union that we're bigger and badder and better, right? All right, then you guys, I'm sure, have seen some of the video of the famous first words on the moon. And, you know, that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind.
Yeah.
The video on the left is what's in the NASA archive. I don't think we have any sound in here. I didn't think about that problem. I always just assume that we're going to have sound.
Okay.
You need the remote for the TV to turn the volume up.
Yeah, maybe we can find that.
Did it?
Is it on the
But
side? Is it on the side of the TV? Nate?
we,
I think the volume on the laptop is turned up.
there you go.
Yeah.
Get back up to that first step,
Yeah.
not even going too far, but it's one small step for man,
You dropped the audience.
Yeah.
for mankind.
There's gotta be a way to get this on to the, okay, so those famous first words. Kind of an interesting story about this video. The reason they're showing how they are trying to improve it is that the original videotapes were actually reused. So NASA had a very tight budget. And so the original videotapes were actually reused. So what we're working with is videotapes that are like, you know, that CBS had or NBC, and they're trying to clean them up
Yeah.
for heritage.
And even that one, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
know,
feedback,
I
and a
know.
lot of TV shows and everything like that, were doing.
I know, it's really
And,
interesting.
they didn't think anybody would actually want to rewatch things a lot back in that time period. Yeah,
the
that was the
Johnny Carson
mindset.
tapes, the old Johnny Carson tapes.
Yeah.
Argon too.
Doctor Who,
okay.
same thing.
Trying to figure out how to get there.
I
you
have a
know.
question,
like-
this is trivia. I heard the other day that Neil Armstrong pushed Buzz Aldrin out of the way to get down and be the first one on the moon. That's not the truth.
No, it was
No way.
decided. It was
Yeah,
it was
it's a
carefully
Yeah.
decided.
Yeah.
Buzz wanted to go on the moon first, but
Yeah.
they said.
Aldrin,
Yeah.
Armstrong was the commander.
Yeah.
You know, he
And
was-
the way the door opened too, he had to go first anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was all carefully orchestrated.
Oh,
at
yeah.
the
Aldrin
time.
was the commander or Armstrong?
Armstrong.
yeah.
Armstrong.
Armstrong, yes.
Yeah, he pulled rank on him.
Oh,
Aldrin
yeah.
wanted to be the first one.
I don't think anything from NASA is not precisely planned.
Oh, yeah.
No, this was very precisely,
We're talking very
Yeah.
line by line.
yeah, this was
Oh, yeah.
line by line planned about how it was gonna happen.
No, because Aldrin
Yeah.
actually did a Catholic thing when he had the moon, and he was not really supposed to do that. He did a religious thing.
Yeah, but that was not videotaped.
But I'm saying that wasn't
Yeah.
authorized.
Okay, that was
Yeah.
not. Yeah, so if
Yeah.
you want to learn more about the Apollo 11 mission, I would highly recommend that you go to the Destination Moon exhibit that's at the Science Center, okay?
That is
It
Apollo 11,
a-
yeah.
Did I say, what did I call it?
I don't know, I'm saying that it
Oh.
is actually the thing, that
Okay.
is the actual ship, it's not a mock-up, it's the actual ship.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a great opportunity
Yeah.
to take photographs of yourself and your best friends. And, you know, look
Yeah.
at that one, look at that, look at that, look at that, isn't that awesome?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but you actually do get to see the Apollo 11 capsule, the actual Apollo 11
Yes.
capsule, yes. And other artifacts that are, this is Aldrin's
Yeah.
helmet and
And, you know, that's the
gloves.
kind of things, you know, we're talking about too, that need to go along into space to make it into space. You know, it's not just the big spaceships, it's this little stuff too. And, you know.
Yeah,
Snoopy,
and they
you know,
do
the
have a
mascots.
good selection
Yeah.
of cultural artifacts from the time period too. So that, you know, and Snoopy has always been one of my favorites, so that was the one that I chose to
Yeah.
show. But I would highly
Yeah.
recommend going to Destination Moon, Science Center. There are free days, there are half price days, full price is only $10.
There's also the Bonterra Space Museum. It's
Oh, yes.
They're opening soon.
Yes.
The Museum of Bonterra Space Museum.
Yeah, practically built
Okay.
by the guys who built the Mercury and Gemini space program.
And me too. I did.
Yeah,
I
yes.
drywalled it.
Yeah,
All
very
right.
good, you're good.
There you go. And I moved the rocket in there too.
Actually went to the Adler Space Planetarium in Chicago as my vacation this year. They had a great exhibit up there if somebody wants to go to Chicago.
Yeah,
I think
Alright.
it's on
Lots
the
of good
20th,
places.
isn't there an adults-only event at the Apollo exhibit?
Yes,
Science
we're gonna
Center?
do that.
Yeah, the adults only exhibit is on Friday, the 20th.
Yeah, it's like about 50
So,
bucks or something.
it's
Yeah.
45.
But it's drinks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two drinks are included in the $45.
Yeah.
You know, free.
And of course, the Destination Moon exhibit. Okay, so really quickly, if we just kind of zip through the other Apollo missions in which we landed humans on the moon. So I chose different kinds of different things to. So Apollo 12, Alan Bean became an artist after his stint on the moon, and his art is really fabulous. One of the things he brought back items, like he had his little pickaxe that he used to pick at the rocks, and he has his boot, and so those are incorporated into his art. Pete Conrad, Apollo 12 is one of my absolute favorite posters of all times. It's a really good poster.
Yeah.
It's just put together so well. I own a smaller version of that, and unfortunately I passed up buying a large version. It was a big mistake of my life. But okay, moving on. Apollo 14, I chose this picture because notice how the regolith is attaching itself
Yeah.
to the astronaut spacesuit. So the moon is really dry, and there's a lot of static electricity, and that makes the regolith very sticky. That is something to worry about in the future.
yeah.
The
Very good to
radiation hitting
Think about it.
the sharp
Think about
pieces
that.
of dust charge it, and so that's why it's.
Oh.
It sticks to this, yeah,
So
I
that,
didn't know.
yeah. And it's sharp too. It's not, because there's no,
It's
it's not,
abrasive.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
yeah, so
There's no wind.
Much more so than our sand, because our sand is.
Rolled.
It's
Yeah.
rounded, yeah, it's like crushed
Yeah.
glass.
So one thing to think about as we're thinking about how, this return to the moon, how are we gonna deal with the
dust,
regolith
yeah.
and the dust, so. All right, so Apollo 15 introduces the lunar rover, and I chose a little video of them on Earth, and if it's gonna load here, and they're testing the lunar rover. So this
Yeah.
is a test bed where we have the lunar lander. The rover is folded up inside, and what we've got to figure out is, can two astronauts actually unload it? And so you might be like, oh no, it's never going to work because, oh my gosh, look at all these people that are here to do it. But it's just like mission control. You got 50 people watching and 2 people actually doing the work.
Yeah.
It's like on a freeway.
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
like a lot of other things. This would be a good time to point out that we had they keep saying the number 400,000. I know that can't be precise, but 400,000 people worked to put the Apollo 11 astronauts on the moon. And so NASA employs a large group of people doing a variety of jobs, and then of course also uses contractors to do a variety of jobs. And in this particular video, you might notice a company that you're familiar with that was the ones who built the rover. Now, does that mean that this rover was built in St. Louis? No, because in 1969, this was not Boeing
No.
here in St. Louis, it was McDonnell Douglas. So McDonnell Aircraft built all the Mercury and Gemini capsules that put humans into space, Americans into space. I realize that there is another country out there called the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Well, the point about those tires that they're showing up there too?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good one to point out.
Yeah, now I don't know if this is a myth or not, but what I've heard is that those tires worked great in the moon, as far as getting rid of the dust. And the technology of how they actually made those tires is one of the things that got lost. Yeah. So if somebody wants to look into see about how they can remake those tires, there's something they're looking at. Because they didn't have, that's one of the reasons why the rovers on the Mars don't have those tires, they have solid tires, they don't have those mesh
It was
ones.
metal wire, I know. that.
Yeah.
It's mesh. I've been in at, what's the Space Center called in Ohio? Oh,
Right,
there's-
Pedersen?
Right.
No, the Space Center, Glenn Research Center. They have a test bed there, and they are testing, when I was there in 2010, they were testing tires that were very similar to this.
Yeah, they're
So,
trying to find it again.
Yeah. So
That'd be a
it's-
good project for the kids at Rolla.
Yeah, it would be.
Kids, you know.
It would be,
They could
yeah.
3D print them too.
Yeah, it probably could.
So since we're on the lunar
Yeah.
rover here, let's watch it in action. You know, we
Yeah.
saw him on Earth trying to figure out how in the world are we gonna get this thing out? It's gonna take too many people. No, it took 2 astronauts. One thing when you're ever watching the videos on the moon, it's really hard to tell distances because we don't have anything to compare it to. So we're used to telling distance by comparing it to, you know, a skyscraper, a tree.
Yeah.
And we don't have any of that. So I don't know how far we're going in this picture. You know what? This is something you can look up if you're really interested. One thing that is interesting to note, remember the gravity is 6 times weaker. And so I think the top speed on the rover was just 25 miles per hour because the fear is if you're traveling too fast and you hit one of those bumps and you become airborne.
Yeah.
And yeah. Goodbye. Goodbye. So this is one of the movies that they have they've worked on it and it's now on their HD channel. So NASA has an HD channel as well.
It's a
So
regular channel,
yeah, that's probably enough to get the idea, right? Yeah.
My worry would be breaking down some distance from the craft and having to walk back.
Well, they
Yeah.
had a suit, they wouldn't let them go any further, they could walk back.
Yeah, they're only talking about a kilometer, I think it was, around the
They could get
vehicle.
there faster, that's all.
That would be
Yeah.
a hike too.
Yeah.
They had to be enough to get back to the
Yeah,
station.
they wanted to use a rover so that they could cover more ground more quickly, so they could pick up more rocks,
Carry
do more
Carry
experiments.
things, yeah.
Carry things, right.
And were the spacesuits oxygenated or did they rebreather?
They were
Sorry.
rebreathers, they were rebreathers for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
they didn't carry, you go through an scuba dive, you go through a tank in an hour, you know?
Sure.
They had to be rebreathers.
Okay.
I actually do not know the answer to that question,
I know.
so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yay.
thank you.
Yeah. Right.
But they
Like,
did
well,
leak,
that's a good question, I don't know.
they leaked off a little bit.
I mean, it's
Like
like,
lithium hydroxide or?
I think they had scrubbers in them too. I think they had scrubbers
CO2
too.
scrubbers.
So, Apollo 7,
1.5 PSI.
now, Apollo 17 was the first Apollo mission that had a scientist on board. So all of the early astronauts were test pilots, you know, they could fly anything, that was the idea. And Harrison Schmitt was a scientist and
Geologist.
geologist. And
Yes.
the point was to be able to pick up the right rocks.
Yeah,
Because they've been, you know, bringing back rocks all along, but they wanted to, you know, specifically pinpoint and bring back
Yeah.
specific
We
rocks.
trained a lot of the astronauts too.
yeah,
Yes, they did.
and
They
they,
became a senator.
yeah.
They did.
And he was-
So, since,
Yeah. To say he was very excited to find an orange rock up on the moon.
well,
Yeah.
orange soil.
Yeah, orange soil.
And it's right here,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
montage of
sorry, you guys said that,
Apollo, it goes 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. So the 14 is a cross-section, and over here, the 15 is a core sample, and then in Apollo 17, we've got the image of the orange soil that he was still very excited about finding. Okay, my phone's giving me messages.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so why am I showing those? One thing is, I wanted to tell you a little bit, very quickly, about the Astro Materials Acquisition and Curation Office. I will never remember that title. NASA's really great about these long titles. So it's the Moon Rock Office.
Yeah.
It was totally designed to store the lunar rocks in the regolith, and then over the years, as we've had additional samples, meteorite, solar wind, they've also taken on that job. All right, and one of the things that is so cool is this online database of all of the moon rocks that have been collected. And you can go on, and one thing that was really cool, like after I saw the moon rock at Destination Moon, I looked it up, right? So you can go by number, right? So here's one of the moon rocks.
You can't read that
Oh,
from
it's
where
all
everybody else
small.
is sitting.
There's a little
But
tiny.
little,
Yeah.
Salt, and
Oh,
all
yeah.
kinds of good.
All right, so we go back, because Philip would like for me to search, I think, maybe, let's just take Apollo 11 and basalt and search, and what this has is, okay, so it looks like there are 20 rocks that they brought back from Apollo 11 that are basalt. And if we go into one of them and find out what data is there, we got information about the rock. We've got information about all of the studies that are connected. Looks like this one, well, there's about 10 studies. And there are all the photographs. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is you'll notice that photography has improved. So that's a photograph from 1969. Cool. And all of the thousands of pounds of rocks are here for you to enjoy. So, and all these rocks can be checked out by scientists to do studies. You and I can't just go and check out a rock.
How do you mean are here?
On the computer.
I'm here on the computer.
Oh.
Da-da-da. Speaking of St. Louis, let's talk about St. Louis, and then we'll get out the rocks.
Website, curator.
Yeah, that's the website right there.
Okay.
And I do have a little bit.ly if anybody wants to, this presentation it's on, there's the bit.ly for it. So you can just write down that little bit and,
Get the whole slideshow.
Get the whole slideshow. Okay, so let's talk about St. Louis here. Oh, here's my point that I look up rocks after I see them. So I took this picture in the University of Colorado Boulder, and then boom, I go home, I can study that rock, right? Pretty cool. This is one of the rocks that was, this was taken to the White House on December the 11th when they signed that directive. But how is it that we have this database? Well, it's because of Washington University. So the professor there in the middle sitting down, Dr. Robert Walker, when they were talking about going to the moon and yay, we're going to put a flag on the moon, he's like, and you're bringing back rocks, right? They're like, rocks? We're going to bring back rocks? Why would we want to bring back rocks? And he convinced them that yes, it was really important to bring back rocks and that you need to handle them a certain way and you need to put them in the lab and keep them in a certain way. And so he worked with NASA to develop that, whatever that moon rock lab is called. Remember several slides ago. So that's pretty cool. So St. Louis still today, Washington University, has a good collection of all of, well, moon rocks, meteorites, etc. And Philip and I have some samples to get out and start talking about.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's my cue.
That's your cue.
Okay, so I don't actually have rocks from the moon, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of rocks that we're talking about, one of the things listed there was basalt. Maybe some of you are familiar with that already. But if you've seen the news recently with lava coming out of Kilauea in Hawaii, that dark stuff is basalt.
It makes up the ocean floor.
And so it's not common in Missouri, but it's common, real common. And so I've got a piece, and it's common. It's not valuable. The white lines are just another mineral that happened to be in this one. I picked this one up off of an island in the Mississippi this year, so you can pass that around to just get an idea of what the basalt is. And it's just a tiny bit heavy because it's got iron in it.
And on the moon, that basalt you would find, for example, in the Sea of Tranquility, the Maria. So it's basically dried up lava, and that would be one place you would find that basalt.
And so then Apollo 15 and 17.
I don't know if you
landed in
want, you guys
craters
can
where the
pass that
basalt
around too
had
if you want to.
melted from an impact. And so you've got
See, it was a
basalt that melted and then solidified.
Mm, Sea of Tranquility.
It looks the way it does.
You've got your
because
hand on it.
of the speed that it solidified. In Missouri, we've got some other rocks that are the same chemical composition of that, but they solidified beneath the surface slowly, and that's our granite, like our red granite at Graniteville. Maybe some of you went to Elephant Rock State Park, so that's the same chemical composition. And then this is obsidian. That's what the melt glass looks like that they landed on in Apollo 15 and 17. And again, these aren't rare or anything.
That's one you want to, yeah.
Because the cooling rate
Let me
determines
see.
the crystal size.
Right.
Slower the cooling rate, the larger the crystal.
Right.
You want me to find some?
Okay. And then,
Russia?
and then this one is a little bit more, it's actually kind of rare. This is breccia, and in particular, it's impact breccia. And this was farmed when impact occurred, and the rocks were broken up with sharp edges, and a lot of the rock was pulverized into powder, and the powder settled around the rocks, and then this re-lithified through pressure, heat, time. And so this one came from an impact crater on Earth. We've got around 200 of those. This one came, I had a geologist collected this and shipped it to me from Sweden. So I'll pass that around so you can see. It's got a little bit of sharp edges on it, so don't be real careless.
And the
it
meteor
slides.
caused this formation, this
The impact.
composition?
Meteor or asteroid, depending on what you call
It
it.
actually melted this rock?
This isn't melt glass, although there is melt glass associated with some of these. This one is just fractures and powders that relithified. And here in Missouri, we've got 3, what I'll call craters, because you know of what that means. Actually, they're not pretty like down at Behringer Crater in Arizona, because these have been weathered for a long time. And so geologists actually call them astrogleams. And we've got 3 major ones from asteroid strikes here in Missouri. And so I just, so you're not going to notice them unless you know a little bit of geology. One is down at Crooked Creek, which is near Steelville, and there's a conservation area near there. The only stuff I found that was real obvious evidence of an impact was on private property where we found shatter cones, which are proof that it was a impact. I got to go faster. Sorry.
Hey, you're fine.
The other one is down at the Decaturville structure. It's about 14 miles south of Bagnell Dam at Lake of the Ozarks. And I actually got to be on the trip a few decades ago where we found the first shatter cone there and proved that that was an impact crater and not a volcanic crater. And if you go along the highway, the main highway south 5 maybe, there's a road cut and you can find breccia that looks like this on the side of the highway. And it doesn't look real weathered because people have been over there hammering it and they sell it on eBay. and then there's a third one near Truman.
Speaking of entrepreneurship.
Wallow
Yeah.
Creek structure, kind of between Truman Lake and Pomme de Terre Lake on the west side of the state, but kind of right at the edge of the southeastern corner of Truman Lake. So we got 3 of them.
And then,
I got one more.
Oh, you got one more, sorry.
And I got a meteorite. This is very rare. The other one's rare, this is very rare. And I'll pass this around.
Let me try and
And this side's
Yeah.
flat because it was sliced so you can see what's inside of it. This was collected in Northwest Africa and given to me by a geologist that wanted to support our giving these talks. And there's little flecks in here that are hard to see unless you get the light to glint off of them. And they are iron pyrite, better known as fool's gold.
No diamonds.
And so there's some stuff. Somebody tried to sell me one this year that was diamond, and he wanted a price that, well, it was a couple of $1,000 for a slice. And he said, Philip, that's a bargain because I spent a fortune slicing that because my diamond saws kept flying apart when I hit the diamonds in the meteorite. And so
you need to use the diamonds and the meteorite as the slicer, apparently,
Yeah.
right?
And I don't know
Yeah.
if I missed anything, but if you have questions, yeah, I glued that one in.
Yeah, this, I'm not trying to take it out.
Because I didn't want it to,
Disappear.
we're doing these same talks at public libraries with teenagers and.
But that's actually part of a meteorite.
That's a meteorite, fell in Northwest Africa, so it came from the asteroid, about 2.5
Excuse me?
billion years old.
Okay.
2 more,
If
2
there's-
more.
if there's-
It's been carbon dated. I mean, how do you know it's 3.5 billion years old?
Because of where they
Said billion or
come
billion?
from.
Yeah.
Billion.
Yeah.
Because that's where they farm.
So I'm-
They don't have the carbon. Christine, are you gonna explain
Yeah,
these?
and it was in around 2 meteorites that are labeled moon rocks in a little magnifying glass. And they are labeled moon rocks, but they're not Apollo moon rocks. They are actually meteorites. So when, we see all these, when you looked at the moon globe, you might have noticed all of the craters. So when a big rock from space hits the moon, and it's an amazing collision, rocks and regolith is ejected into space, and some of it ends up on Earth. So those are meteorites that are a chunk of the moon. So they came from the moon through space to Earth, and meteorite hunters collect them, and people pay nice prices for them. So
The same color as the moon.
the same color. I wonder why. Because the rocket, because you know what?
Grayish.
You know what? We discovered that the moon is not made of green cheese or Swiss cheese. It's actually made of rocks.
Yeah.
So that was, I have like 3 slides really quickly here about, so what did we learn from the moon rocks? A lot, but I want to mention 3 things. We discovered 3 new minerals. And when they were discovered on the moon, we had not found any on Earth, so we thought we had a brand new mineral. As it turns out, these minerals are on Earth and were eventually discovered. Okay, so they're mentioned right there. Okay, using the moon rocks, we've kind of come to the conclusion about how the moon was formed, and so it's the giant impact theory. I'm sure many of you have heard this about when the Earth was young, a small planet collided into Earth, and the debris from that collision formed the moon. And one of the reasons why we know that is because the oxygen found in the moon rocks is the same oxygen isotope found on Earth. And that leads me to the second big thing that we learned from the moon rocks. Oopsie, this little thing, does anybody know how to move this little thing? Because you can't see what they are. Well, I think I have them memorized. Oxygen. So when you study the moon rocks, you get 40%, more than 40% of the rocks and regolith is oxygen. So earlier you guys were talking about how in the world are we going to live on the moon? We've got oxygen there. We just have to mine it, heat up the rocks, and capture the oxygen. Maybe a little more complex than that, but that's basically the idea. Silicon, that's glass. So we can build structures, right? We can 3D print solar panels. Iron, I touched it and it goes. Iron, aluminum, magnesium, titanium. We've got great building materials. And then calcium, you're thinking, why do we need calcium other than for strong bones? But gosh, calcium is used around us. We've got drywall and paint. Calcium is the basis for that, and a lot of manufacturing actually.
If you want to
uses
grow
calcium.
plants, you need that too.
That is true.
Calcium,
Good point.
magnesium are really big for that.
Yeah. So one of the big aha moments is from the moon rocks and soil is, oh my gosh, we can live and work on the moon. So the question is there water on the moon? Somebody, I don't know if anybody's asked that. The answer is yes. We did not discover that from the Apollo missions. We've discovered that since then. The first starting discussion about that was about 1998 when they started getting some hints that there is frozen ice deep in the craters. If you want to look at the globe, the craters in particular at the North and South Pole that are really deep, that the sun never shines there. You know how that old saying, the sun never shines? It really doesn't. And so the ice is not melted and hasn't boiled away. And this map shows the water ice, and you can see that where we landed, we didn't really actually land in a good opportunity except for Apollo 15 to be able to discover the water ice. We landed in parts of this big Maria area, nice and flat. Didn't land in the middle of a huge deep crater. That wouldn't have been logical to do that. And so we didn't discover the water ice. And 2009 is kind of we've been since, like I said, about 1998, we started studying this. In 2009, we're like, yes, indeed, we've got water ice on the moon. And there's several studies that you could go out and read and learn about that. We won't take time to do this, but this is really fun to watch. So if you want to just Google this at home, tour of the moon in 4K, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that's been orbiting, probably 10 years now, has mapped just every nook and cranny of the moon, and they have even a better map than what we have here, and it's really beautiful online to study it. Okay, so we talked about.
Where's St. Louis on
Well, I think there's,
Mississippi.
I'm wondering, we've got to probably find a connection. That'll be an interesting thing to do. Is there some scientist or
Yeah.
whatever that there's a crater or
Named
a
after him.
mount named
But you
after?
can go down
That'd
to
be
38th,
interesting.
you know, the 38th,
Parallel?
and then over,
Is there a St. Louis on the moon?
yeah.
Well, a St.
Yeah.
Louis person.
A certain, you know what I mean? Because all these different craters that are named after all these famous people. Do we have?
Maybe Stoffel's up here someplace.
Yeah. Springfield Aerospace.
That'd be great,
Okay,
yeah.
so one of the things that we want to talk about today, though, was this return to the moon. We spent half an hour talking about the missions to the moon, and we said we're going back to the moon. What is that going to look like? And one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, and again, I'll encourage you all to go and look up this video. Actually, there's a bunch of videos about this. The concept is called Moon Village. It was first talked about by the European Space Agency in 2016, and we're making some progress on this. And with the concept of the Moon Village, it's not a specific mission. It is planned to the nth degree from the very beginning. It's a village that would grow over time. And the European Space Agency is encouraging all countries to participate in this, all companies, individual people. It's not a European Space Agency plan. And there's an association called the Moon Village Association that started working last year on plans for this. And they are meeting again on November 4th and 5th. I am going, if there's anybody who wants to go with me. And they are developing a roadmap. They're doing these working groups and trying to figure out, okay, so what are these different pieces that we need and how can we get started on this? I found online the 80-page paper or so that came out of the last workshop a year ago. And it answered some of these questions that Philip asked. So Philip wanted to know about the Moon Village. He says, what does it have to do with us? Well, there we can build things. That's the short answer, right? We can get involved. He asked the question, isn't European Space Agency and NASA doing it? Well, yes, but they're encouraging commercial companies to be a part of this. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Is technical information available? It's coming through the working groups through this Moon Village Association. Is there contest prizes, anything? A little bit. But for the most part, they're assuming that you're going to come with your own dollars. Okay? So who's coming to the table with their own dollars? SpaceX. Right, so SpaceX's goal was to take tourists to the moon in 2018. That's been pushed back to 2019. Right? And who else has the money to do this and who's going to be participating? Blue Origin. I'll go back to this other picture in just a moment. So Blue Origin, is the company that is owned by Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon. If you hear, I love finding and listening to his talks.
Mm-hmm.
He likes to talk where you come in with another person and you ask questions. He doesn't do a planned presentation. He just does these, like, we call them fireside chats. And they're really fascinating. So just look up on YouTube, Jeff Bezos. He talks about how he started Amazon with the goal in mind that he would have enough money that he could start a space company and get people into space. That was his goal from the very beginning. He got bit by the space bug when he was young, and he wanted to get people into space. So he is selling $1 billion of Amazon stock a year to fund the company, and he's been working really a lot under the radar. I was just curious today. I thought, I wonder if he's putting, where is this money going? I looked, there are at least 200 job openings right now. So if you're not tied to St. Louis and looking for a job, Blue Origin might be a possibility.
Don't leave us, do it here.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
other companies that are working, these are just another example. So this is a lander, a lunar lander, that is, if you notice, this is Israel, but it's not the country of Israel. It is a private company. Volunteer. We can do this.
All right, now I've got to put in a plug, because Rick already started it.
Yeah.
When he mentioned that the engineers from Mercury and Gemini were volunteering at that space museum. But in case you don't know, the human crewed space flight began here in St. Louis with the creation of the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft. They were engineered and built here to work on that stuff. Started in 1955 here at McDonnell Aircraft Company, and there's about 20 of these engineers still live in the area here and are involved in stuff like that
Space
museum,
museum.
an adopted cause for them. So, all right, so there's
And they're called Max Old Team, and you can find them on, they have a website.
They're in the
Max
video
Old
at
Team.
they're in the video at the Apollo exhibit too. They're featured
Yeah.
in that.
we had one of them here as a speaker at the Venture Cafe this year.
Thank you.
Very good.
Ray Tucker.
Yeah.
Everybody's.
Okay, so as we're talking about how we're gonna return to the moon, how we're gonna do this moon village, we've talked a little bit about, the people with the money, Elon Musk and SpaceX. We've talked about smaller companies, and there's a lot. There's way more than, this is just one example. Blue Origin and NASA. Did you
Yeah.
wanna talk about
Oh, the government, yeah, the gateway.
the Lunar Orbital Platform
Yeah.
Gateway? Okay.
Okay, so, one of the things that NASA's working about returning back, they're not actually looking at a mission to go back to the moon per se, but they're actually gonna be putting another orbiter around the moon. And it's gonna be like a docking station, basically, for anybody who wants to do things on the moon. Their reasoning is like, well, we can put the money into doing one mission to the moon, and again, we're not looking at more than a kilometer around that area. And we didn't know, we went to the moon 40 or so years ago. We didn't know there was water on the moon until 2009. You know,
49 years ago.
Yeah, 49 years ago. And so it took that long to actually find it, because we were doing these little one missions at a time thing. We were landing nowhere near that. So it was like landing in, if we landed at the, a desert island someplace, so we were wondering if there was life on their planet Earth. But so with the gateway, they can actually put a mission up there. They're thinking about putting like, the size of it is kind of almost about the size of this room, actually, about the size of a good dorm room. It's not gonna be that big to begin with, but they can actually add more modules onto it as they go. And the idea is that it's just gonna be, orbiting around. It's not quite in a lunar orbit, but it's close enough to think of it that way. But it's gonna be orbiting around the moon, and it's going to be basically dormant and spaceship comes in, and all the power is going to come from Orion and everything like that, and then that's going to power it on. And we know we can do this because of what happened with Apollo 13, that we can have a dormant ship and power it up from zero and come back in. So we learned things from our accidents too.
It's gonna be like a high orbit that some other participant could connect to and
Yeah.
use for space or supplies and so on.
Yeah. And then, so people can bring things back there, and then we can bring it back to the Earth. It's kind of like, like a docking station. But they're looking at about like 20 to 30-day missions that you can run from up there, so you can kind of go back and forth if you need to in that time frame to go to different places or.
But this is an orbit around the moon.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's not exactly, it's a sublinear orbit kind of in between the Earth and the moon, but it's basically around the moon. They call it something. It's not really a lunar orbit, but it's close enough. I like to think of it that way.
So is it gonna circle Earth and then go out and circle the moon? Or
No, it's gonna be between, it's around the moon, but it's just
like an elliptical orbit?
Yeah, it's kind of
It's around the Earth, but it's just gonna be close to the moon, very high orbit.
yeah.
When is this coming?
They're looking
Well-
at 2022, I think.
Well, yeah, I think 2023 is the,
Yeah.
but was kind of just, this is a
Yeah.
data dump from
Yeah.
their memo saying, hey, we need people to get involved. My phone's about to die, so I was trying to
Plug it in there,
kind
yeah.
of plug it in.
Yeah.
And so, this is a
Ideas,
data
yeah.
dump from an article.
Yeah.
And by the end of the summer, they are hoping to have, am I having a little, there we go. They're hoping to have, basically, oopsie, my phone. Oh,
Okay.
that was a mistake.
Well, they're kind of doing a, if we build it, the ideas will come type of thing, because
Yeah.
when they built the space station, they had an idea for it,
There you go.
they planned it like everything you do in the government, they planned it to the T.
Yeah.
And then since that time, we've used it for so many things, couldn't even imagine when they first built that thing. So they're going from the thought process that we can't imagine everything we're gonna be doing with this.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have some initial ideas, we'll have people come up with ideas, do some initial things, but there's gonna be things happening on there that we can't even think of.
And they are currently working on it, because their goal is by the end of the summer to have a list, have a plan to get started.
And they're
And-
asking for people.
Yeah,
What ideas they have.
and here is one of the places where like you can go to find out how can you get involved. It's called Next Step. You know those acronyms,
Yeah.
Space Technologies for Exploration Partnerships. And they are, these are screenshots that I grabbed. So right now, they are working on E and F, I think. So they're saying, hey, we are, we need you all to start thinking about flexible lunar
Go back
explorers.
to
Yes.
the
Okay.
website was there.
Right there?
Yeah,
There it is,
that's one of the video.
Yep. And remember,
Yeah.
Hold on.
You can get the copy of the presentation if you
that's
need
right,
it.
for the Bentley. So that's one way we can be involved. They're also looking for trash.
Oh, yes.
They already have the trash. They're looking for trash pickup.
Yeah. If you ever saw the TV series Salvage One back in the day with Andy Griffith.
Oh, I did see that.
No,
I did
Brian
see.
Keith.
Oh,
Yes.
wow, that was
Andy
something
Griffith,
else.
Brian Keith.
No,
Yes,
the
yeah.
one he wants to do was
Yeah.
Quark. He ran a
Quark,
trash.
well, Quark did too, yeah.
Quark ran a trash.
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
go slower.
Yeah.
Like the rocket took off like at 4 miles an hour. Slow acceleration.
Yeah, from the back, it was in the backyard, it was junkyard, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you use monohydrazine for this.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yeah.
monkey or something.
Yeah, there's something weird.
Well, this can come to
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, it was actually not a bad idea.
It was
It's,
a pretty cheesy.
yeah.
It was pretty
Yeah.
cheesy shit.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
But if we always build off of old TV shows for our future, so.
you sent a couple of links.
Well, they never moved, it seemed like.
Did you talk about all, see, I put these links in our show.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you say everything you wanted to say about these links?
Yeah, I
The
think there's gonna
NASA
be,
Sinks ideas for Gateway, yeah,
Yeah.
and this one?
yeah, that's kind of like an overview of what's going on with the
Okay,
system.
okay,
Some of that, yeah.
all right, so we did talk about those. All
Yeah,
right.
One of the things they're talking about doing with that too, is that they're going to, that's gonna be kind of like the model they're gonna use, is a small little station up there where they can bring things up and, refuel and stuff like that. And then actually they're gonna have another one like that they're going to build at Mars, basically. And then there's gonna be the Gateway transport, kind of like the ship they use in the Martian, the Hermes in the Martian. It's gonna be, they're looking at doing something like that between the two stations then, going back and forth.
Kind of like Buzz Aldrin's
I think
cyclone.
I'll jump in with just a
Yeah.
little business comment about all of this. So, when we were going to the moon in the 1960s, NASA was 4% of the US budget.
Yeah.
And it's nowhere near that now.
No, it's
It's it's a half a penny of 100,
Yeah.
half a penny out of,
Oh, yeah.
a half a
small.
penny
And
out
so
of
they-
$100.
They can't do all this with just NASA money. And
No.
so it's really been emphasized that it's going to be more like our US economy now, where it's primarily commercial, but there's
Yeah.
government things. And you can kind of think like airliners. You can fly,
Yeah.
you can fly on an airliner, but the government does the air traffic control part of it. And so this is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to get involved. And so, anyway.
Yeah, and I thought I'd do an example. So, Dr. Clegg Watkins, she's got her PhD PhD at Washington University and is still working here, even though she works for the Planetary Science Institute. And she is using LRO data and trying to figure out the best places to land on the moon for future landings, depending on what you need, right? Are you landing because you need water? So that's one of the things. That's just an example of somebody who is making a living in St. Louis with a return to the moon.
Who's she work for?
She actually works for Planetary Science Institute. So some of the money is coming from NASA. They are paying Planetary Science Institute for that data, for that information. But then there are other people who are looking for that data too, right?
She gets grants all the time.
Yeah. A lot of grants as well. Yeah.
What's the intended power source to make use of all these things that are on the moon? I mean, to make electricity, to mine, to drive?
A couple of ideas. Number one, the simple answer is solar, because we can make solar panels from the silicon in the moon. We can build them on the moon surface. That's the idea. And Philip, I think, wanted to jump in. I was going to give another couple examples.
No,
but Philip wanted to.
I've been still thinking about the other question that was asked about where the rocket fuel was going to come from. And so one of the things that Jeff Bezos has talked about is Christine pointed out that there's craters on the poles of the moon with water in them. And also, if you're at the pole, you can set up your solar panels where you're always in the light. And so
I think a lot of people are really focused on the South Pole.
South Pole, yeah.
Hydrogen from the water.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can take your water, use electrolysis from the electricity to produce hydrogen and oxygen, which is
Your rocket fuel.
rocket fuel, which can be used to go to the rest of the solar system.
And they're also looking at the helium-3.
I'm answering
Yeah.
that question. I don't know if
Yeah,
that was
thank
out
you.
of order or not.
Yeah, we could talk about other different ideas for power, but solar is like one of your number one,
Yeah.
But you need to transport a lot of solar, existing already manufactured solar panels out there to even make another solar.
Power.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the, so is this your expertise area? Is solar?
No, I'm
Okay.
just.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Because I say, you could be the person to help figure that out.
Yeah. But the other thing looking at is the helium-3 too.
Yeah.
And,
Well, there's a lot of minerals there. Like I said, the
Yeah.
first one, but after that, they can manufacture the minerals on the moon.
Well,
Yeah.
you gotta start with enough energy to
Yeah.
make something.
Yeah.
Should-
You could use.
Wouldn't that be?
Well, the 3D printers, the 3D printers.
It could be.
There's some-
Could be,
But then again, you
Could be
have
fuel
solar,
cells.
Yeah.
so you can react with water, get
Yeah.
ice.
Yeah.
So, crack that.
fuel cells would be another option for depending on what we're, like for buildings.
Yeah.
Inside of buildings, just like inside of spaceships.
But, Most,
Um,
solar cells work great in the moon though, because you have most of the time it's not night. You have a large period of time, there's no clouds in the sky. So they can, yeah.
Just radiation.
Yeah,
That brings
yeah.
up important thing as well,
Yeah.
you mentioned radiation.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned meteorites. How do you protect while you're up there?
Well,
The
that,
base from getting smashed by
Yeah.
a meteorite.
the thinking is that most of the time we would be living under the surface of the moon. So a couple of ideas that have come up is that you take a crater that's existing and build in the crater, use that silicon to do like a glass structure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the new things that we've learned about in the last few years, and I forgot to put in this presentation, and should, is the lava tubes.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the lava tubes are big. I saw one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
pictures where they put Philadelphia in a lava tube, and Philadelphia was small compared to this lava tube.
Yeah.
So we've got caves here, right, because of water running, right? So on the moon, because of the lava that was a long time ago, that 4 billion years ago, we have these large lava tubes. And so
Yeah,
that is
makes sense.
probably the
Kilauea,
answer.
The Big Island's got those huge lava tubes.
And if you can
Oh,
imagine
I forgot about that.
If you can
Good
imagine this
thing.
melt glass being like a couple of 100 feet high in the bottom of that crater, and then you burrow underneath of that, you've got a real solid roof.
Yeah, that'd be a perfect place to put it.
Yeah, I wonder if we have some images. No, not really.
There's
Here's
those holes
here's
that
like-
hole.
Here's like one of the ones that
Yeah.
I saw that
Yeah.
the study was showing.
Yeah.
Philadelphia inside along the tube.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that seems to be one of the solutions, but a lot of the earlier work talked about using a crater, then, you know, you've got all that soil, that regolith, that you could build, you know, on top of. The regolith also makes good concrete. I mean, that was some of the early research that was done, makes great concrete. So that would be one.
The sharp edges make it stick together
Better,
better
okay.
than
Yeah.
round sand.
Is the core of the moon still vibrant like the Earth? Is there some geothermal that you can pull from?
Well, we don't think so, but, I mean,
There's no magnetic field.
yeah. The magnetic
Oh,
fields are
there's a magnetic
different.
field.
There are magnetic fields, but they're different.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
understand, I don't think we
Yeah,
understand those.
that would be
Yeah.
one of
That's
the
what protects an
areas.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's areas of really heavy gravity and on the moon too, that they don't want what's underneath it there.
It
Yeah.
varies.
Yeah, it varies a lot.
Yeah,
Because
if
there's-
you can look that's another one of those things you can
Yeah.
look up, a gravity map.
Yeah.
Because there was a orbiter called Grail that focused on, I guess the G and the R probably stands for gravity.
Yeah.
And so they have created a gravity map, so yeah, there's areas where the gravity is stronger.
Yeah.
The 6 times weaker is the general, you know, that's what we use but it is
Yeah.
actually variable.
But,
I've always wanted to ask knowledgeable people such as yourselves, what is, tell me, and there's something wrong with it, what is wrong with pushing the International Space Station out into orbit around the moon?
Oh.
that's a good question.
I
don't-
know it.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's,
Yeah.
it's pretty delicate. And
Okay.
If you put
Thank you.
a strong thrust on it, the ends are gonna, maybe, you know.
It's not very self-sustaining either, and it's
Yeah,
constantly being resupplied.
They keep resupplying it, and
Yeah.
you
Wow.
wouldn't wanna have a long way to go.
So
to your
what
target.
we would have out of the moon, far more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is this.
Yeah.
How old is that thing? 20 years old?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
quite-
basically
yeah.
built since
We're always throwing
1990.
stuff away.
Yeah.
They're
Oh, yeah.
talking about,
Well, they're gonna-
technology's leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a
I think-
bit now that was never here.
Yeah.
But it's up there, and they do thrust on a regular basis to restore their orbit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to avoid incoming.
And I think, you know,
Incoming,
yeah, it's debris, yeah. And NASA's pulling out of it in 2024 officially, but they're still, it's gonna be open for public companies to actually still go up
Anybody
there.
who wants to,
Yeah,
can afford
It's-
it.
they're not gonna take it down, it's still gonna be up there.
Yeah.
So-
I
I
can't
was looking
quote
for some
numbers, but
space
you would
farming.
be
Yeah.
shocked by how little power they have on it.
Oh, yeah.
It's all
They
solar.
die for this USB port.
It's all solar.
Yeah. Well, it's not
Yeah.
just that, it's just, yeah.
Huge.
So one of the things that we didn't even get into is feeding people, you know, so people
Oh, yeah.
are working on, ooh, wait, is there a group waiting for us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, people are working on space farming,
Oh,
so that's another day.
They
We'll
do-
talk about it
Yeah.
another day.
They can deal with poop too.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
That
You have
is
to use
true,
it.
bye.
It's soil. It's-
We have to leave, there's another group coming, bye.
It's gotta go somewhere.
Okay.
Hey, I recommend